for this mission. The main purpose was this food study to see if maybe astronauts might want to cook once they land on Mars, because you get gravity back. You know, you're traveling in space for 8 months without gravity, and it makes sense to just eat your food out of a pouch like on the International Space Station. But once you land on Mars, what if you had like ingredients that you could use to cook food? Well, the challenge is they need to be shelf stable. That means like last a long time and whatnot. So what we looked at were two different food systems. So basically the just add water and heat meals, and then also like dehydrated food meals. And, you know, we kind of like switched on and off which type of meal we had every day. And we filled out surveys, how much we liked eating it, how good it tastes, how hungry we felt, how full we felt, how much time it took to cook them, all those sorts of things. So that was like the science part of the food study. But what we found was that food was really important just in general, because we gathered around the same table for every meal, and that's where we talked about a lot of things, talked through problems, talked about our ideas for the mission and our projects that we brought into the mission. So it's where we got to know each other. So food for us was a way of bringing us together. And there's some thinking that maybe it should be that kind of important aspect. It should be considered an important aspect on a mission to Mars in a similar way. And I mean, I just think about food right now during this time. I mean, so many people are baking bread who've never baked bread before. And, you know, I know that back in March and April, I was very interested in getting new recipes and trying new flavors, just anything to sort of stave off that boredom. You know, I wanted to try something new, and food was a great way to do that. So I think that food plays such an important role inside space missions and outside space missions. And what made our experiment so unique to me was that it really did say that food is an important thing to look at on a Mars mission, not just for calories and to keep you healthy, but also to make sure that the crew is happy and healthy and psychologically, you know, sound. So I think that was a really exciting part of what High Seas was in the very beginning.
Thank you. Do you know if there were any other programs that like experimented with how food impacted astronauts before High Seas?
Well, there are a number of research papers that kind of anecdotally address the issue of food and mention its importance. And NASA has an amazing test kitchen. So they're always cooking up new recipes and new meals, but kind of combining those two things, you know, looking at the food, looking at the meals, and then asking the questions of how does this affect crew cohesion, how you get along, how, like if you're bored and how you just feel in general. That was a new question.
Cool, thank you. I have a kind of weird question here. If you could eat any kind of meal or any individual food in space, what would be your ultimate to eat in space?
My ultimate to eat in space. I mean, the thing that I really missed was fresh fruits and vegetables. We didn't have that because all of our fruits and vegetables were dehydrated or freeze dried. So you'd have to like add hot water to them and then they'd puff back up. And that meant that they had the same sort of like mealy texture. But if I could have like, I mean, God, like a nectarine or some fresh pineapple or like green beans that crunch in your mouth or carrots even. I mean, just anything that is fresh with a texture, I think I would really love. And you know, that's a tall order because you'd have to have a pretty robust space farm going in order to ensure that. And those, you know, right now they're still very experimental and they might produce just a couple of cherry tomatoes every once in a while. So,
yeah. Thank you. You write about how the organizers for High Seas were looking for candidates that quote unquote embody astronaut personalities and characteristics. What do you think it was about you that helped them select you or decide that you'd be a good fit for this program?
Well, I mean, just on a fundamental level, I have a background in science. And so that's something that all astronauts have to have, like science, engineering, or mathematics, or they have to be licensed pilot with a certain amount of hours. And so I was coming from the more science side of things. And then I also, had this writing side too. I've been a science journalist for a long time. And I think that maybe there was some thinking that I could translate the findings of the study or the experience of high seas for the general public. And while I was there, I was the crew writer. I blogged for Discover magazine and The Economist, and so I was sending out these little notes about what it was like inside. In terms of personality, I don't know. I am pretty easygoing, and I think that probably you don't want super high-strung people in an environment like that, or people who are not tolerant of others. And I think that just the time that we spent together during the tryout, you got a sense of how people interacted. And I think just in general, there was, a good vibe, a good rapport between the six of us that went into that dome for 4 months. So I think high seas, it lasted for 5 years, and there were a number of crews that came after us. And I can only speak to my crew's experience of selection. It wasn't extremely rigorous. It was a little bit of, I think, more gut feel for the organizers of the mission. I think in the later missions, there was a more systematic approach to it. And that information has been used by NASA to try to figure out how to select a crew. But in our case, I think that there was a lot of gut feel, and just like how do these people seem like they're going to work together, and what are their backgrounds? And, we were all just so enthusiastic about the project. We were the first crew. We wanted to make sure everything worked so that more of these missions could happen, because it's a really important idea, to test the psychological challenges in isolation for astronaut-like people. As if they're on Mars. So we wanted to do a good job. So I don't know. It's kind of a long-winded question.
That's right. You were you talk about the guinea pigs in your book. So it's kind of like you were the guinea pigs for high seas in a way. Maybe they use those or those programs that came after you, used you kind of as a jumping off point for choosing more people.
Oh, definitely. We were kicking the tires of all the systems and all the ways that they approached it. But I think that just kind of happened with every mission. Each mission was an experiment in and of itself, and you just learn so much about how to do the next one and the next one and the next one, and how to change it and modify it, and make sure you're asking the right questions, and providing the right supports for everyone. So yeah, it's experiment within an experiment within an experiment within an experiment. Experiments all the way down, I guess.
Oh yeah. I hope I'm not running over time here. So there are some questions that I was really interested in asking you, so I think I'll just skip to those. There's a lot of data that points to women being a better choice for space exploration, and you delve into that in your book, but also you wrote about that for Slate as well. And so at this moment, we're being told that, one of the next people to go to the moon is going to be a woman. So I'd just like to know your thoughts on that. I guess why we haven't had women, be at the forefront, but now going to the future and having women be a big part of space exploration. Just your thoughts on that.
Oh yeah, well, that's really exciting, because the thing is, of all the people who've gone to space, there's some like 600 some people who've been in space, and actually only a small fraction of that, I think like around 100 or so, have been women, maybe even less than that. It's really a small fraction of women who've been to space at all. And that's a result of, legacy political decisions to pull astronauts from like military fighter pilot like groups of people. So what that means is, NASA has this very strong military tie and a very like macho image that they were working with for decades. And it was only in the 80s when that started to change, even just a little bit. But still, I mean, it's still a huge part of who NASA is. And so, yeah, the idea of women going, like women being more efficient astronauts on a mission to Mars. That's I mean, it's a little bit complicated, but the idea is basically that women on average are smaller and are metabolically less active than men. And I saw this on our high seas mission. You know, the 3 women on the crew used less than half the calories than the guys did and ate about less than half the food. And when you think about sending 2.5 years worth of food on a Mars mission, that's a huge amount of weight and payload. And so if you want to save money by like reducing the payload or just like allocating space and that sort of thing differently, why don't you just cut the food stores in half and do that by sending only women? So it's kind of like it's a good economic argument. And, you know, there have been some studies in the past that also show that women are better suited to isolated environments or have like better hearts and in low G. And just, it's not super, those aren't super conclusive, but just in general, if you go with the economic argument on a long mission to Mars, it might make sense to just send people who need less food. A moon mission is just 2 weeks, so that's not as big of a deal, but I think that what is a big deal is just having more people who look like more people in the world in space and representing everyone in space. So I think that it would be very exciting for more women to be in space in general and certainly on the moon. Yeah.
Thank you. I do enjoy how you write about, you know, how we don't really have a lot of representation or inclusivity when it comes to space travel. So yeah, I appreciate that you write about that. So I think we have time for maybe one more question from me.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. You've got time, Lane.
Okay.
Ask whatever you want. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that kind of segues into my next question. You talk about NASA style bodies and all the things that would disqualify a person from being selected as an astronaut, whether that's, you know, their academic background or physical things as well. And you kind of pose the question, even though it's a rhetorical question, I think, in your book, but what have we missed by not including them? So I just would like to know, what do you think would be those benefits of sending those kinds of people into space who maybe don't meet the academic or physical requirements that are set by NASA?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't be so sure, but I do wonder about, I mean, the astronaut corps is overwhelmingly male and overwhelmingly white, and it's either a bunch of people who have like been very academically ambitious their whole lives, or ambitious like through the military. And so it's an interesting kind of ambition, and it's not necessarily the usual American kind of ambition where you think about like people who are just like interested in making money. So you do have an interesting cross section of Americans who are NASA astronauts, but I was wondering about just other kinds of people who maybe aren't so scientifically minded or haven't gone the military route. I think of like tradespeople in particular, electricians, plumbers, folks who've worked in landscape, thinking about those space farms, librarians, philosophers, artists of all kinds, and musicians. Like, what would it be like if people who actually like focus their lives on pursuits outside of the usual NASA astronaut profile, what would the relationship, what would like humanity's relationship to space be like if those kinds of people went, you know? Yeah, I just wonder if there might be more, if it might be more part of our culture in some way in America, or maybe just talked about differently, because right now the conversations are, you know, NASA going to Mars to sending astronauts to Mars to explore scientifically, or Elon Musk sending wealthy people to Mars to colonize it. And so like those are our two options right now. And I wonder what sort of stories we're missing by only believing that those are the two ways that we should be going to space, and that's what space is good for.
Thank you. I think this will be my last question. You write poetry in addition to essays and now your book. When you write poetry, is there a different emotion in that as opposed to science journalism or essays? And what is your process for writing poetry, if you have one?
Oh, thanks so much for this question. I like it. Well, yeah, okay. So yeah, poems are like a whole different beast for me because, well, I think for science journalism, that's very sort of like logic driven, and the objective is to explain complicated things as well as possible. And so I think that that's where I was coming from with this book. But I was also, I kind of wanted to approach these essays in a more poetic way. And, you know, there are a few ways that you can do that. Since there was a lot that I needed to explain, I brought my science journalism background into explaining it. But what I allowed for, I think, I hope, was that, you know, when I write a poem, I don't really know what's going to happen next. And I just sort of, I just try to be really aware of, I allow my consciousness to proceed as it will, and then just be aware of that that flow and try to honor that and capture that. And so in a way with a number of these essays, that's how I wrote them. Like I had it in mind kind of what I wanted to say, but I didn't know what was coming next or how some of these things were going to connect to each other. And so in that way, the essays kind of have a poetic flow. They move around in a way that was unexpected to me. But in the end, I think it worked out for many of them. But yeah, so it's a weird these essays are kind of a weird combination of science journalism, like explainery stuff. Like I hope that the explanations are clear, but then I allowed for a poetic sort of sensibility in the way that it was structured and the way that it was organized. That said, like the thing that I love most about poems is that there's a lot of mystery in them, and you don't necessarily know exactly what's going on all the time. You don't, I mean, sometimes you do, but there's mystery and surprise. And, you know, when you're trying to explain some things like in an essay collection about a simulated Mars mission, you don't necessarily want to be too mysterious about that. You kind of want to like just say the thing. So yeah, in that way, it's not at all like a poem, but there are some elements of it in there, I guess. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Katie, I wasn't sure if we were going to read or go straight to
Oh,
question.
yeah, Kate, I would love to hear you read. And then maybe after that we can do some audience questions.
Sure, okay. So one page that I like to read is, well, I got this, when the book came out, I got an email from a blogger who runs a blog where he asks authors to look at page 99 of their book and see what's on that page, because the writer Ford Maddox Ford once said something like, by page 99, the book is what it is supposed to be. You know, it's settled into itself and the voice that should exist there. So I looked at page 99 just to see what was there. And at the top of page 99, it reads, made by Playtex, the women's bra manufacturer. So like, I just thought, yeah, of course, that's definitely, this is my book. So I will read just a little bit before that and like a little bit after that. In 1994, Neil Armstrong sent NASA a thank you letter for his spacesuit. It turned out to be the most widely photographed spacecraft in history, he wrote. That was no doubt due to the fact that it was so photogenic. Though its true beauty, Armstrong added, was that it worked. Prodigious layers of choice material, cleverly assembled, is all that separates astronauts on EVAs from a harsh death by void. Spacesuit a spacecraft, then, a house not much bigger than a body, to paraphrase the poet Francis Ponge. who was writing more generally about monuments and their scale. A spacesuit can be seen as a shell of a person's own size that employs humanity's genius for adaptation and not disproportion. Armstrong's human-sized spaceship was designed and made by Playtex, the women's bra manufacturer. It's a riveting underdog story told in Nicholas de Monchaux's book, Spacesuit, Fashioning Apollo. The Playtex team, led by a car mechanic and former television repairman, and made up of seamstresses and engineers, convinced NASA to let them send in a test suit for consideration, competing at their own expense against 2 other companies NASA had invited to the bid. With its 21 layers of neoprene rubber, metallized polyester films, and other materials, the Playtex suit outperformed the competition, proving it could protect astronauts from the dramatic temperature shifts in space, from 240 degrees Fahrenheit in the sun to minus 280 in the shade, as well as ultraviolet radiation and micrometeorites moving up to 10 miles per second. Cosmic armor birthed by a bra company. So that's in an essay called On Vessels, and just the idea of looking at like spacecraft and like our dome in particular, and just like a lot of different things. And you know, the spacesuit. Can you hear in my background?
Oh, just so it's fine. We can still hear you.
No, that's great though. I might put myself on mute if that happens again. But our spacesuits on the mission were a very important feature of the project, but they were highly contentious because they were basically repurposed XXL neon green hazmat suits, government issued hazmat suits, and they didn't look like most spacesuits. They were kind of baggy and looked dumpy, and like in that way they simulated spacesuits because they were hard to move around in. But they just, some people on our crew didn't think that they looked good in pictures and were very concerned about that. So the question of spacesuits was a big one for us on the mission. And so this is a section that kind of talks about a little bit about those spacesuits and the drama of our spacesuits, and then also, the Apollo spacesuits as well.
That's really interesting, that form and function.
All right.
Elaine, should we take some questions from the audience?
Yeah, we have a few questions here from Jennifer. How did this experiment and the time to quasi-self-isolate / reflect help you to make changes in your life on the outside?
Whoa. To reflect and make changes on the outside. Well, one thing it did was it changed the way I wrote entirely. So I went in as a science journalist, you know, and I was very into writing about experiments from the outside, but then all of a sudden I was inside the experiment and I had to write about myself inside an experiment. So that was, that changed me a lot. I came out thinking that I needed to write more about myself. And also I started paying more attention to like the things that I was thinking and you know, capturing those things. So I think I came out a little bit more contemplative, and also because I had been so, you know, just kind of cut off from Earth effectively. I mean, you get to pretend you're cut off from Earth, and so you try to believe you're cut off from Earth, and that does something to you. You really feel it when you step outside and you can like feel that breeze for the first time, or like get that first sunburn, because I'm kind of a pale person and we were in Hawaii. But I appreciated this planet a lot more when I got back, because I mean, it is really a good planet. And so, I don't know, I kind of wish that feeling could scale to more people in this time, just to appreciate what it is to live here.
We have a question from Sid, who is 11 years old. Hey, Sid, thanks for joining us. He wants to know if you went a little stir crazy, and that's actually, one of my questions for you was, what was the biggest psychological challenge that you guys dealt with? Was it stir craziness? Was it homesickness? What was it?
Yeah, well, I mean, stir crazy, that's such a good way of putting it. And it was hard to know that was going on, because we like to think that we were astronaut-like people, and astronauts don't get stir crazy, astronauts don't get bored. That's the story that's told again and again. But astronauts are people too. So I think they actually do. They just sort of like suppress it in a way. So really, the key was to be aware of when you're stir crazy and just take care of it. Like I remember, this is. We had a bunch of balloons. I don't know, some like the head of the project, Kim Bin, said, sent a care package, nominally sent on a rocket, and we had to go retrieve it. But and it included balloons, and this was for a celebration because we had like monthly celebrations to mark the passing of time, which was very important. And so we just had these balloons laying around, and like, I felt like I needed to blow off steam. We exercised every day, but just like I played volleyball in college and high school. And so just like batting this balloon around like a cat or something was really, I remember just feeling really relieved afterwards. What a simple thing, but yeah, absolutely stir crazy. Cause you're with the same people day in and day out. You're inside the same space every morning, every night, Yeah, and I think that a lot of us are experiencing something like that now. So it's just like the key is to recognize that it's happening, understand that it's okay, because everyone has these feelings, and then just like do something productive or good or helpful to like blow off that steam, to get it out of your system, and just know that it'll happen again, and you're just gonna have to like find more balloons or something.
Sure. Okay, well, that's great. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap up in just a minute. I'm going to ask you I have one other question was interested in knowing. So what was the first thing you ate after the project was over? And then what was the first thing you did? Where did you go? Like, what was the first thing that you did? And what was the first thing that you had to eat?
Well, this kind of goes back to Lane's question about like what I would want to eat, because I don't think I will ever forget we walked out of the dome, and there was like a small press conference. So we sat down at a table and we talked to the media, but there was this spread of fruits and vegetables on a table next to us. And I was so anxious just to like dive in and eat those, to like feel that crunch in my mouth. So the first thing we did was like this press conference. The first thing I ate were carrots and broccoli and pineapple. And it was so glorious. It was really wonderful. And then after that, going to restaurants for the first time felt like a big deal. My first swim in the ocean, I remember that, sleeping in like a bed that wasn't in this dome, I remember that. So the first beer I drank afterwards, definitely remember that. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time tonight, for your thoughtful answers, and for this book. I want to encourage you, those watching, to pick up this book from Midtown Reader. It's a great book. And like I said, we do have a limited number of signed copies from Kate. So thank you so much, Kate. And thank you, Lane, for being here tonight.
Thanks, Katie.
And Katie, thank you so much. This was really fun. I love the
absolutely. Okay. Have a good night, everybody.
Take care.